Everybody. My name is Emily Ropars. I work for Early Choices here in Illinois. We are the Birth to Five Inclusion Initiative out of the Illinois State Board of Education. And our goal is to improve inclusive opportunities for all children in Illinois and their families. And today is our first podcast and what I hope is going to be a series called Inclusion from the Start. I have two incredible inclusion advocates with me today. I'm so excited they're here with me. I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with Bridget Brown.
Hi, my name is Bridget Brown. I am a self-advocate, an inclusion advocate. I'm a young woman with Down syndrome, and as a disability, I I plan based on dreams and not on fears. When it comes to my life, Master Eckhart said it best. If the only prayer I say in my life is thank you, that will be enough.
Oh, I love that. The only prayer I say is thank you. That will be enough. I love dwelling in possibilities, and I also love dwelling in gratitude and possibilities together. So thank you, Bridget. And then also I have Dr. Jen Newton here.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm Jen Newton. I am an associate professor of special education at Ohio University. I am also the director of strategy for the NORA project, which is also an Illinois-based inclusion initiative. And I can be found on Teaching is Intellectual on Instagram and Facebook, talking about issues related to inclusion. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to meet Bridget.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have a conversation with both of you. I should say that I know you both from different contexts, but in my head, I thought this is a great partnership of conversation to bring your two great minds together to talk about inclusion. So thank you so much. So the first thing I'd like to do is start with a definition of inclusion so that we can start from a base of shared understanding. And I'm going to read it. And if you're watching this, I'll also have it on the screen. This is a definition that comes from two early childhood professional organizations, the Division for Early Childhood of the Council for Exceptional Children and the National Association for Education of Young Children. This actually came out in 2009. Early childhood inclusion embodies the values, policies, and practices that support the right of every infant and young child and his or her family, regardless of ability, to participate in a broad range of activities and contexts as full members of families, communities, and society. The desired results of inclusive experiences for children with and without disabilities and their families include a sense of belonging and membership, positive social relationships and friendships, and development and learning to reach their full potential. The defining features of inclusion that can be used to identify high quality early childhood programs and services are access, participation, and supports. So I wanted to pose to both of you, thinking about your lives, what words stood out to you, or how do you envision inclusion? So Bridget, I'm going to ask you to answer that one first.
Inclusion, dignity, human rights, access to the curriculum, hope, friends, belonging, and possibilities.
Wow. Jen?
That definition is definitely better, Bridget. We're missing a lot of those words. So yeah, we need to tap into you for the revisions. I think that that definition was written almost 20 years ago now. Over 10, I might be wrong there. And I think it only addresses the space piece, access, participation, and supports. It comes up short in the systemic failures and the way that ableism operates within the system. And so even if we provide access, participation, and supports, kids will fail to achieve if their teachers don't believe in them, if we continue to make dangerous assumptions about kids, and if we continue to, place barriers there for children, right? Saying if you don't behave in this way, or if you don't communicate in this way, then you aren't able to access a space. So I think that it articulates maybe where we were as a field at the time. I think that it doesn't meet the moment. And I really like some of the words that Bridget said. I think I would love to see included more of the ideas around hope and belonging.
Mhm.
The word belonging isn't in the inclusion statement. And I think belonging is really the ultimate goal. Right? Inclusion is only the rhetoric of non-disabled people if true belonging isn't to be had.
Mhm.
So I do think framing that belonging, like Bridget said, is really an important piece that's missing from the statement.
Yeah, Bridget, you have been included in your family and your community since you were born.
1986.
Yep. Yeah. And you talk a lot about your family being your champions.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that kind of moves us into thinking about the next kind of big idea I wanted to talk about, which is that we don't segregate people that we value. That's something that I learned from you, Bridget. And so part of what I'd like to hear is, how do you include other people to help them feel that because you value them?
All right, I'm going to start with my family always made plans based on dreams and not on fears. They always thought about the possibilities and not the barriers. They believed in me and honored my dreams. They helped me believe in in myself. Other people in my school and community started to believe in me and dwelled in the possibilities, so they opened their minds and hearts to include me. I was the first person included in my school and district. Being included made all the difference in the world. My mother was inspired by a quote, "We never segregate the people that we value." She believed that if I was in a separate classroom or in a different school, that were telling the world that I was not valued and I had no gifts to offer the world. I also would not have any access to the curriculum and would not be learning the same thing my peers were learning, and that's really important. I am terrified of how different my life would be if I was segregated. Now I attended college. I have a job at the nursing simulation lab at UIC. I have my own consulting organization and many other experiences that I would have not have had if I was segregated. Inclusion, I think, saved my life. How this helped me be included and valued? I help people with disabilities to find their own voice so they can speak for themselves. I remind them that they matter and that they are magnificent. I teach them how to do a person-centered planning, and so they can really think about their dreams, hopes for their own life. When students are ready, I teach them how to present at their own IEP meetings, so they have a strong voice and can lead their own meetings and be the main designer for their life. People have the right to speak for themselves and not let others speak for them. When people dream, they always dream about living in an inclusive life and where they don't valued as a human being with gifts and strengths. When inviting to dream, most people I know dream of in a life filled with possibilities and not limitations and failures. I always say to deny dreams is to disable the human spirit.
Bridget, I want you to come teach my students about that, because they're going to be future special ed teachers, and I want you to teach them about how to include kids in their meetings. They think it's impossible when I tell them they should include students in their meetings. They're like, no, I've never seen that happen. Bridget will show you.
Absolutely. Bridget, I was getting really kind of overwhelmed with emotions when you're talking, because I really was feeling what you were saying, that, from your mom's perspective, if you were sent to a segregated school or classroom, that was sending a message to the world that you were not as valued, or didn't have gifts to offer. I'm just really sitting with that. I've been doing inclusion work my whole life, and so I know it, but that's sticking with me right now.
And I think the thing about the piece that you said, Bridget, about how it saved your life, right? The opening up of the potential and every opportunity that happens after that. I think one thing I have conversations often about with people is they don't see the outcomes, right? In early childhood, then children move on, and we don't really see them at 37 as college students, as employed, and so we don't connect those dots with the decisions that we make from when you were in preschool. And you're drawing a direct line saying the decisions that were made then led me to where I am today. And I think that is really powerful.
These are what I talked about with Emily. She knows a lot about champions. A champion is a person who fights for or defends a person, a protector, advocate, and a warrior. So champions in school, those are student champions who never, they never fought. They fought against anyone who tried to show me ability to fly. And they teach me not to give up on myself. And that kind of made me feel like that, wow, that's really powerful. So not only champions open their minds when they're willing to think about education in a new way. They took time to learn about me, and they asked, why should we include her? Instead of asking, why should we include her? Because that's the most important thing, to ask why, not how and why should we include her. And so student champions opened those doors, and they helped me be successful, not just through all the way through from early intervention all the way through high school. And I walk across the stage at my own graduation from high school with all the people I have met.
So Jen, part of what Bridget was just talking about is folks focusing on why should we include someone instead of how we should do that. And from my perception, ableism is a big part of why folks get stuck on that. Why are we including this child or this young adult? So understanding what ableism is kind of a process. And I'm wondering what tools and resources you use yourself to help unpack that, to help open other minds, continue your own journey, bring people along.
I love that question. I think that I was very traditionally trained in special ed, and I always was pretty bad at it because of the perception around, or the focus on deficits and remediation. And I'm just not wired that way. And so I kept looking for community around interrogating that, right? Like, why are we trying to change everyone? Why can't we change our expectations, change our systems, change our approaches, rather than expecting everyone to comply with one really rigid, kind of narrow way of being? And when I got involved in the disability studies and education discourse and some discrit lit, it helped me to really unpack the fact that it's a systems problem, right? Just like racism is. And that ableism is as old as time. And we know historically that, ableism has been around since the beginning of humans. And it takes work to like unlearn that. And it takes opportunities for, well, like openness. You have to be willing to consider that you might be wrong. As a special educator, you have to be willing to consider you might have done harm. I think those are the things that stop people from wanting to really interrogate ableism and its power and the way that it works. But people like Bridget, who are doing this kind of advocacy out loud, are exactly what propels people to think differently. So, Bridget, I can talk all day long about ableism, and I do talk about ableism all day long. But it's so much more powerful to hear from you and your lived experience that people who actively saw value in you and saw you for who you truly are made it possible for you to continue to do the things that you were dreaming about doing. That is essentially what we're striving for when we talk about anti-ableism, right? We're talking about removing barriers, but also presuming competence, but also like listening, letting you be in charge of your life like we would any other young person, young adult, older person, anyone. The agency and autonomy that is so often not afforded to disabled kids in the same ways that non-disabled kids experience. So I think I say this all the time, but listen to disabled people. If you don't have disabled people in your life, which grow your social circle, but if you don't, Instagram and social networks are amazing. There are so many people on Instagram and TikTok who are really teaching about how ableism works in the world. Amani Barbarin at Crutches and Spice, Nina Tame. There are lots and lots of people, Emily Ladau, obviously, who are really doing powerful work around unpacking those systems that are in place. And that's a great place to start. So Demystifying Disability by Emily Ladau, obviously reading Judy Heuman's book, but paying attention to people like Jordan Zimmerman, whose documentary is called It's Not About Me, Otto, who is on Instagram at Otto Types. There are lots of really cool people who are trying to get more and more educators in particular to think about ableism and how it works in schools. And I think about ableism all the time, and yet I don't always see it in myself. So I think the other thing is to have a thought partner, somebody who can call you in and say, it feels like, you're forgetting sometimes to do this certain accessible feature, or those are things that we can do for each other. And also remembering that people have different ways of being. And different preferences and different ideas about what inclusion means for them, what supports look like. So the other thing is just being flexible and nimble enough to recognize that people need different things and want different things, and you have to like move with that. If you're really trying to be anti-ableist, it means you have to individualize your approach. So I do think it is a lifelong journey, but if you aren't naming it as a part of your like social justice framework, today's the day. Today's the day you start really thinking about ableism, because without a conscious effort, we will continue to uphold it, and we will continue to harm kids and families in our own communities. Because the thing about ableism is that it robs non-disabled kids and people from the opportunity to know Bridget. Right? Think about all the kids who benefited from having her as a friend growing up, who would have been missing out on that opportunity, and they're better humans for it now. And so you have less unlearning to do, right? If you grow up with people who are disabled and who are living their own lives in their best way, you don't have to unlearn as much as those who have been segregated. Because non-disabled kids are segregated too. They're missing out on those opportunities.
Yeah. So the big word for ableism is discrimination. So we don't discriminate the people that valued as a person with a disability, but for all disabilities should be included and accepted and not discriminated. I think that's one of the words of definition of ableism. So.
I'm going to
That's
keep coming back to that, Bridget. I'm putting that quote up on a sticky right on my computer. I'm going to keep coming back to that because that is it. You boiled it exactly down. We do not segregate people we value. We don't.
I think if that quote was presented by someone at their IEP meeting, it would lead to conversations. Why are you suggesting a segregated setting for me? So I love how you, Bridget, a true leader takes their own experiences and brings others along with them. And I think one of the biggest gifts that the world has been given by inclusion is that it allowed you to fulfill your dream and become the advocate and leader that you are in the inclusion world. So we're going to talk a little bit about dwelling in possibilities and presuming competence to concepts that are really, really important to me. Bridget, what are some accomplishments that you have achieved because you and your family and your community are so committed to inclusion and dwelling in possibilities?
The accomplishments that I had through school is that they believed in me and they honored my dreams. They helped me believe in myself and they taught me never to give up on myself. Other people in my school and district and community, they started to believe in me. They dwelled in the possibilities. So they opened their doors, minds, and hearts to include me. As I said before, I am the first person with a disability included in my school district when I was born, and I was the first person, and so that kind of helped me when I graduated from school. It helped me be the world changed for me when the director of special ed said yes for inclusion. That made me feel like I belong in this. I belonged. Students sit next to me at lunch, and they never ignored me. They include me in everything. They had me in groups. They help me in choir. They help me in everything that I went through in school. They valued me as a human being and not my disability. And so it's like they recognize the sacred dignity of the human person, and they protected that dignity, and that is what I believed in, and how people that I was included in through school, all of the classmates helped me be that included because they opened their hearts. They opened their hearts to be their champion because they helped me be successful today. I am successful because of the champions in my life who helped me, who opened the doors for me. They fought against anyone who tried to destroy my ability to fly. My speech team coach invited me to be on the special a speech team because her heart was open. And I am grateful for all the champions who are champions in my life, who always dwell on the possibilities, and they make dreams come true.
Bridget, have more kids been included since you? Did you change the whole like trajectory of how kids were placed at in your district?
Since that happened, when I was been included, segregation is still happening today for those people with disabilities. Because students with disabilities, when they come into that school and they have that IEP, it is part of the public law that they have to have a person-centered planning map. So when they go to school, they have a plan for students with disabilities. But today, they're still in a segregated mainstreaming classroom. AIDS been pulling all the people with disabilities out of the classroom and not in the classroom. In science, we had circle of friends, and we had peer coach, we had peers encouraging peers in high school, and we had Special Olympics, and those they don't segregate the people that we value. Because we're back into that quote, we don't segregate the people that we value, because that's the most important thing, is that we don't segregate them. We keep them in during recess with all the children that are with them that they grew up with. They should not be separate from those people. They should be included, belonged. They should be treated, and don't call people retarded, because that is what ableism is. We don't want to say those words or say meaningful things to people, because that is not what we need. We need people with disabilities to be accepted and welcomed. That's why we have doors opened. That's why champions open doors, open minds, and open up hearts to include people. And because of them, look who I am today. As that social butterfly, I reach out to those people that heard the speeches that I have given, and they helped, and they know how to value those people.
I'm also
Absolutely.
thinking about, oh, sorry, Emily. I'm also thinking about how you said the special education director said yes. So it's a choice, right? Segregation or inclusion are choices that we can make within the system. And by saying yes, that person had to understand that they would need to provide supports to teachers, to you, to your family, to ensure that you were getting your needs met. And that was a decision they were willing to stand by, right? So that's a choice that we can make to shift our resources. People will often say to me, Bridget, we don't have enough funding, we don't have enough teachers, we don't have enough. Well, sure, we do. Segregation is really expensive. It's really, really expensive. It would just require a shift in the way that we use our resources. And you had a director at that time who said yes, but that is a choice, right? To say no would have been a choice. That's a choice. I think that's a really powerful thing to remember, is these things aren't preordained. They're decisions people make.
And that's how I felt at the nursing simulation lab at UIC. They helped me be included. Their doors and their minds and their hearts have me belong in the same place, in the same classroom. And they open that. So Killboy, Lynn, and Chris, they opened their minds to willing for me to be involved in the simulation lab, to be an actor as one of those simulation standardized patients for disabilities, to open those doors, saying, "Oh, so people with disabilities can play an actor as a disability." Now that shows inclusion in the arts, not just for inclusion for schools, education, theater and art and anything they want to be, because that is what they dream of. And that's what Daniel Venom said. Make no small plans, they hold no magic. Make big plans and write them down.
Make no small plans because they hold no magic.
Make
Make big plans and write them down?
That's from Daniel Burnham, and he designed the whole Chicago lakefront after the
That's right.
Chicago fire, and so that's a quote from him. And because big dreams is really important, you want to dream, and so make big plans, and it's good because you use that to dream big, and it's like dreams force you to stretch yourself beyond your limits. One man said to deny dreams is to disable human spirit. You want to be included. You want to be in the same place with your siblings. I grew up in that school district where my siblings went. I'm the middle of two siblings, and they both included me all of my life. My sister, my older sister, and my younger brother. And not just from them, they helped me be included. Because that's what dreams can come true. If you have a magic wand, anything can happen. That is the fun part.
That
You've
is the
got me
fun
writing
part.
all these quotes down over here, Bridget. I'm gonna have a Bridget Brown quote book by the end of the conversation.
Yeah, I do every time I talk to Bridget.
I just memorized the old speech, and that's the problem with me. I can just go on and on with it.
Well, we're
it.
lucky that you do.
Mhm.
What you were just saying, Bridget, reminded me, Jen, of what you were saying about when you first started out as a special education teacher, that it didn't work for you because you didn't want to dwell in limitations. You're like, why can't we dream big? Why are we focusing on this? Why not be hopeful and use special education as tools and resources to support this individual in achieving whatever they want in their own lives?
Yeah. The positionality, the access that kids get or don't get, right? And I taught 4-year-olds, and they didn't have access. They weren't in the 4-year-old programs that their neighbors were in. They weren't going to the place where their siblings were. They weren't at community preschools. They weren't in church basements. They weren't, hanging out at grandma's. They were in all day school because the system, and they were bused. And they had these really long days for 4-year-olds that were not developmentally appropriate, and also had expectations for them that, they needed this sort of intense intervention in order to start school. And it always, I feel, even now looking back, like I would have been okay with being in my own class, right? Like we had a good time. I think my kids were really emotionally safe. But the pressures to focus on things that were really about mitigating their identities rather than really embracing their identities and teaching them about, disability pride, identity pride, various ways of being in the world, and honoring those ways of being. Even in my, I'd inclusion classroom, as it was noted, but 8 kids who had been identified and had service and support needs under IDEA, and then 8 kids who qualified as at risk, which is a whole other thing we can interrogate, right? Mm-hmm. So that's not inclusion, because that's not where everybody else is. Those are not proportional numbers. And they were doing a lot of like schoolwork instead of a lot of play, which is what 4-year-olds should be doing. So already at 4, there's this idea, right, around their worth and their value and the work that they have to do to be included. Like Bridget's saying, you're not ready to be included. You don't have the pre-literacy skills. You don't have the self-control. You don't have the self-regulation. You don't have the self-help skills to be included. And we always, in special education, we really set this bar of like, earn your way into your peers, into your access to the rest of the world, the rest of your community. And I really resent that. I really push back against that, because we are all better in community. I firmly believe that. And having a community of our peers, kids we can choose from, kids we can like and not like, right? Kids who teach us things and we can teach things too. All of those things are really important parts of life. And when we take those opportunities away from children at a very early ages. Recently my friend Teresa and I published an article about that kind of, you're born in the US right now and sent through a system, right? So sent through, you identify as qualifying for early intervention, or your family, pays for childcare, and you kind of are tracked in different ways, and they have lifelong implications. It's like Bridget's saying, right?
Mhm.
So the perfect storm that came together for you, Bridget, is what we want to make happen for every kid who has the opportunity to dwell in their own possibilities. And I think it's also really cool that your mom and dad, or your family broadly, was rooted in possibility as well. I think sometimes families get really overwhelmed with how much deficit framing there is.
Mhm.
And that's on professionals too, right? Is like really, I have a friend, a very good old friend, who just had a baby with Down syndrome. And he texted me and he was like, so we just had this, the baby's here, and turns out she has Down syndrome. And I was like, oh my God, congratulations. That's so exciting. Like, send me a picture. And he said, you're the first person that said that. And I was like, that's ableism. I said,
Mhm.
she is going to have a robust and amazing life. Like, just let her be exactly who she is. And you will learn so much
Can
from her.
you,
And with her.
so I'm the second vice president to the oldest organization for 60 years, and it's called the National Association for Down Syndrome. And we have a program called the Basket Program. And what it is that we give basket programs to brand new babies with Down syndrome, to give some information to them about what NAS is, and inspiration and dreams. And NAS has a wonderful programs that they do, and we are going into a bowl-a-thon to the NAS, and so. But we were like, as second vice president for NAS, we like to give that baby that information basket to infant babies with Down syndrome. So if you could, Jen, to send that over to us, I could give them to the
I love
basket.
that. Yes, I love that. Thank you so much, Bridget. I will. I already sent them your website.
Oh, that'd be great. Then my address is on there, so and my mom and some of the emails that we have on there.
That's awesome.
And I could write a letter to them about how congratulating and give them some hope and some
that.
tools and strategies to give them that, and just kind of like opens up, because we have like fashion shows, and we have like brand new babies with Down syndrome walking down the walkway, and it'd be wonderful for them to be involved.
That's the thing about inclusion too, right, Bridget? Is that oftentimes people will sort of want to talk about this idea that inclusion doesn't mean that you can't also have affinity groups. Like, I'm sure you love having friends with Down syndrome too, and having the opportunity to have a community of people who have shared experiences. That's also inclusion. The opportunity to move in and out of communities of your choosing is what inclusion is really about. Oftentimes, disabled kids don't get to pick their friends and don't get to pick their communities. And I really love that point too, because that involvement that you have, that advocacy work, is also within community of people who are also looking for the same opportunities, and you can share resources. That is often viewed as being like segregated, when it's actually exactly how we all operate in community, right? We choose our bowling teams, or our, kickball teams, or our church groups, and all of that. And I think that's a really important component too, because oftentimes if families feel like they're trying to really advocate for inclusion, then they're not taking advantage of those opportunities for affinity groupings. And I think that's a really important point. I'm glad you brought that up.
So after, kind of our conversation today, Bridget, you've said so many things, and Jen, you as well said so many things that I think will really resonate with people with and without disabilities and their families, giving people ideas and hope and new ways of thinking. But I wanted to give both of you a moment to just kind of give one more thought if you have something else that you'd like to share with folks before we close today. So Bridget?
My thought is include those people today. Don't segregate the people that we value. Include them. Welcome them. Belong in the same classroom, at lunch table, sit with them. Be their champion. Don't criticize them. Be there for them. Invite them to be in your groups and be their champion. So to welcome the possibilities. With my compassion, with my gratitude and compassion for my heart, I like to end with a quote from Miss Gandhi. Go and be the change you wish to see in the world.
Thank you.
Bridget, I'm going to go first next time we have a conversation because it's too hard to follow you.
That's what everyone says when Bridget's our keynote. We don't want to go after Bridget.
I'm not going after you anymore, Bridget. I would say that if we ask ourselves when we're advocating for segregation, where we think this child can be better served and why, we need to identify the why. What is happening in that space that is better? And oftentimes space, rooms are the only reason, right? Putting a child in a different room is not a service or a support in and of itself. So interrogate what it is that child's going to get in that space that they can't possibly receive in the gen ed classroom. If we consider the gen ed classroom as the only viable option, the only space a child can be, the place where learning happens, the place where curriculum is presented, the place where kids are, what supports and services are needed in order to allow that student to maximize their benefits in that space. We need to sort of stop relying on options. I always think about that quote in Including Samuel, which I realize is a very dated reference, but don't tell Dan or Sam that I said that. But I always think about that quote that if there are segregated classrooms, we use them. If there are segregated spaces, we put children in them. So what if we stop allowing that to be an option and we have to actually focus on the supports and services? Right now, we're not doing that. So thinking about the supports and services and not thinking about space or place is a really good way of considering if your intentions are inclusion, if your intentions are, like Bridget said, access to curriculum, or if your intentions are to remove a child from their potential and their opportunity. So that's like what I would say is a framework for thinking through the decision. If you're in a position of making decisions, I would encourage you to ask yourself what it is about that space that's going to benefit the child, not the adults, not the school, not the schedule, not the minutes of service time, but what will benefit the child.
And I'm also going to end with something else, Jen, if that's okay.
Please
include every person that's involved in the IEP. Don't let the system do the job. If you are that person and you have that young child with a disability, bring them to an IEP meeting. It's about them. If you don't let them speak on behalf of themselves, the system will talk about you, and that is not what we need. We need that person with that disability to speak or do like a poster board of what your life will look like. And if you need someone like me to come in to just talk about person-centered planning or inclusion or champions or disability awareness, I can do that. www.butterfliesforchange.org is the website that I actually have that my Aunt Dee Dee helped with. And please invite me to your place so I can help you to start including people today. Invite them to your IEP meetings.
Thank you, Bridget. And thank you, Jen. This has been so great. Such a wonderful way we're doing this in the morning. It was the perfect way to start my day. And thank you for listening. There will be links in the description of the video for everything that we talked about today, so you can continue. There'll be information about how to contact and reach Bridget Brown. I'll have all of Jen Newton's social media in there as well. And thank you for listening.
Thank you.